So for my project, I did a project on Huntington's disease, which is something that my dad has, and it's a brain disease that affects the brain. So I learned pretty much about how the disease affects the brain and like how someone can actually develop the disease. So this one is the Huntington's disease brain, and this is the normal brain, and this one the toxins are spread out, which means that this black part you see is just bigger than this part. There's no cure. So
is there a treatment?
There's no treatment. So it's a family disease, so if it runs in your family, like if one of your parents has the disease, you have a 50% chance of getting the disease.
Does that worry you?
I'm adopted personally, so no. So I guess I'll just talk about some of the symptoms and what happens to you. So basically you lose your ability to walk, talk, swallow, just do everyday things, which can be very hard in a family, so that's kind of why I focused on this project.
Is this a depressing project for you to have to work on?
I mean, a little bit, but it's very interesting to me just because like I didn't know a lot about it, and like I thought it was like a good opportunity to learn about it.
Does it feel better to know more?
Yes.
Grace, tell me about eating disorders.
Well, they're all very life-threatening, and they all have very different symptoms depending on what it is. And I talked about the three main disorders, the anorexia, binge eating, and bulimia, and those are all like completely different. Well, since I entered high school freshman year, I realized how prominent eating disorders were here at Wellesley High School with all of the stress and social media, especially nowadays. And a couple of my friends actually have been going through this process recently, so it's been like a lot. Well, the recovery process varies depending on who you are as a person and how severe it is, like if you catch it like earlier on or like later. You follow all of like your favorite artists or like actors or actresses on social media, and you see like the perfect body or whatever, but like you don't realize that it's actually a lot of it's photoshopped. I am not a very good test taker, so doing this program actually really opened up my eyes into other programs that I might want to take, or like it's a different way of learning, and I've learned more these past 6 months than I've learned in all of school, so yeah.
Okay, so basically here I have an infographic that I made about OCD to give people a general sense of basically what the disorder is. And then my main product was, after doing my research, I realized how time-consuming and intrusive OCD can be for some people that have it. So I decided to create a before-school routine from the perspective of a person who might have OCD. So and I did this to show basically how these daily tasks that people just often just go through mindlessly, like how these daily tasks can become such big and time-consuming things for some people that have OCD. And I did this through a VR format that basically has the thoughts that this person with OCD might be thinking as they go through these different tasks. So in the first scene, they'll see the person waking up and realizing that they woke up at 6:31 instead of 6:30, and them having a big spiral about what this means for them, and then eventually them going back to sleep and deciding to wake up at 6:40 because they'll be waking up on the 0. So then this scene is the person waking up and still being basically anxious and compulsive about that. And then the next scene is the person in the bathroom realizing that somebody's moved their products, and basically them having to move it until it's just right. And then the last scene is the person putting on their shoes but not being able to have it at the exact right tightness. So I read an article that really impacted me. It was about a woman describing her experience with OCD, and it was a lot more extreme OCD than I think most people have or know that OCD can be. But it really made me realize how like basically life hindering it can be for some people. And also my brother has OCD, so that was another thing. Like, I think that this project was also another way to gain a little more empathy for him, and in general just try to get people to kind of understand a little more, not what it's like to have OCD, but what it can be like to experience some different parts that come with the disorder. I think the main thing people should know is that a lot of people like to say, oh, I'm very OCD about this, I'm very OCD, I like to have everything organized, but I think the main thing that you should really know is that OCD can be an extremely intrusive disorder that can make it like almost impossible for some people, not for everybody. It comes in different degrees, but it can make it very difficult to complete like daily basic tasks. And I think that like before assuming that somebody can just not do something or that they should just get over it or get rid of these compulsions, I think that people need to understand that like this is an anxiety disorder, which means that these people, while they might know that they're being irrational, they have to like complete these compulsions in order to relieve their anxiety. And then the cycle spiral comes again, where there's an obsession and then there's a compulsion to relieve the anxiety of that obsession, and then it's basically a spiral. I had to use a Ricoh Theta 360 camera, which is basically like this special camera that I like put on my head kind of, and I'd never used anything like that before, and then I had to upload it and use like a special software that supports 360 videos. So I couldn't use iMovie or anything that I was comfortable with. So it was pretty difficult to try to navigate this software because there's a ton of different options on it, and I just had to be able to find like the different buttons that I needed to use. But I kind of got the hang of it after my probably my second video. It started to become like, okay, this is what I need to do. These are the buttons I use. It became a little more familiar.
For my project, I made a ping pong table. I was studying how to make a sustainable wooden project, and pretty much what goes into making sure wood doesn't rot and stuff like that. And then I also looked into graphic design, and specifically a tool called Adobe Illustrator and DigiLab. A lot of primers, sealers, and then also not letting moisture get on it really at all. I didn't really realize that. I thought, what better time to do it? I've always wanted to do something with woodworking. I had to research what I needed first, and then we put an order in for Home Depot for everyone and what they need. Wood's not cheap, but it wasn't too bad. I tried to use a lot of like the side stuff that I have we already had here. So yeah, we had a little tournament in the morning, which is nice.
So I chose to do my project on starting a Wendys franchise because I thought it was very interesting. Some history behind that is my grandfather got into the business in 1969 when Wendys was first formed by Dave Thomas, and through that formed a friendship with Dave Thomas, and eventually opened many of his own franchises and had a bunch of our family members working for him as well. So I thought that was like a big part of our family's legacy, and through that also became very wealthy. So I thought I'd want to learn more about it and maybe possibly follow in his footsteps. I've never worked in a Wendys, but I've worked in at Sweetgreens, which is it's like a fast food salad type place, but never worked at a Wendys. So if you want to start a Wendys franchise, I mean, there's a bunch of things to keep in mind. The main thing is you got to find a good piece of land where you think you're gonna like grab a lot of attention from people, and you have to make sure you're like 4 to 5 miles away from a Wendys to maximize your profits. And I mean, I found this piece of land it's on Southborough at 361 Turnpike Road. It's $995,000. It's about an acre in size. That was the best piece of land I could find. But if you're starting a Wendys, the most important thing I think is you should learn on someone else's expense. Like, you should try to become a manager at another Wendys before you go into it yourself, because I think that's crucial, because you don't want to be investing anywhere from $2 to $3.5 million and not know what you're doing. And Wendys make sure they don't choose anyone. You have to go through a qualification process, all these questionnaires, and actually go to school for 4 to 6 months.
Do they have their own school for Wendys?
Yes.
So I made a dress completely out of plastic bags and plastic water bottles. This is made out of fused plastic bags. This is plastic bags, and then this is like water bottle caps. This is water bottle caps. I made my jewelry too out of like water bottles, and then this bag part is also, sorry James, plastic bags, and then this is fused plastic water bottles, it's 2. So I made this to symbolize kind of how important it is to recycle, and how like once you recycle, as it says right here, this bottle can turn into a pair of jeans. So once you recycle, plastic has a completely new life, and the plastic is like melted and it can be made into whatever you want. But if you don't recycle it, it can be really impactful to our environment and ourselves and the animals living in our environment. So I mainly focused on like the sea, because a lot of plastic ends up in the sea. And there's some quotes that I put on here that I found very impactful. So like over 1 million marine creatures die each year from plastic trash, and plastic can take from like 5 to 1,000 years to decompose. It depends on the plastic, but it just like it takes so long to decompose, and it multiplies our lifetime for like a second of decision that we made from throwing it into the trash instead of the recycling bin. So just you have to recycle and give the plastic a new life instead of ruining another life. And I really like designing, I really like fashion, and then I also really like nature, and I really like the environment, and I hate how much, like, I used to live in Florida, and I hate how much trash I saw in the trash all the time, or in the beach all the time. So it was just kind of a mixture of both, and like putting like 2 big interests of mine together and like forming something that will symbolize and like create a change kind of. So a lot of stores have been using like trash to make their clothing. There's this specific store, Eco Elf, that asks fishermen to get trash from the ocean or fishing gear that's like laying around in the ocean, and they make every single like part of their clothing is made out of plastic from the ocean. And then also like something that is more like universally known is the brand Zara. The brand Zara is now making a lot of clothing that's like they have a line that's made from like plastic, and it's just like these coats and like these like different articles of clothing that's made out completely out of plastic. And there's like different setups if you go into the store that says like how important it is to recycle, so kind of like this. And there's a bunch of different stores that are changing to do this now too. I'm wearing jewelry that I made out of plastic too. This is, thank you so much, it's from my shampoo bottle. So this and my earrings too are made out of plastic, and I was just like, I thought I would wear something that I made.
Yeah, so the Evolutions program is an interdisciplinary project-based learning program. There's 4 subjects, 4 disciplines that are involved in it: art, science, social studies, and English. And all of the curriculum is integrated within each other. And what you see here is the culmination of a semester's worth of work. So this project that you see here now is the Midstone project. This is the part of the year where students take the ownership for their learning. They develop the research topic they want to research. They then create a project, and then they implement the project, and here are the results that you see. About 5 years ago, Dr. Chisholm visited another program out at Concord-Carlisle High School called Rivers and Revolutions. And they have a similar program to ours, a sister program. It's organized a little bit differently, but there are some similarities. And when he came back here, he felt that WHS needed a program like that for learners who maybe don't fall into the average category. We get to about this point of the year, and they realize that they're more engaged, with the more hands-on, the project-based learning. Versus sitting in a chair, being stagnant, taking a test, writing an essay, etc.
So my project is how fast fashion is having a negative impact on the environment. So this is an infographic. It's basically explaining the different impacts that it's having, and then at the bottom it's explaining what we can do to begin to make a change. In the middle, this is a wave that I made out of recycled clothes. So instead of throwing them away and like adding on to the issues, I decided to make a project to raise awareness about them. And then this basically explains the different brands that are having a negative impact on the environment and that are basically being exposed for what they're doing to the environment. And underneath, I added a list of brands that basically are helping the environment. They're matching their prices with these cheap brands, and they're using their profits to give back to the environment. They're basically using materials that are biodegradable, so they take up to like 2,000 years to degrade into nature. They're also dumping out toxic waste into bodies of waters, which is getting into oceans and killing aquatic species. And they're putting on such a high demand for water, so the cotton industry is basically draining out oceans and seas, which is already like a scarce resource, especially in the areas which it's doing it. So basically the idea of fast fashion came into play, so where it's basically the brands are matching catwalk trends, and then within weeks they're making rapid production, like mass production of clothing using cheap materials so that they can make a bunch of clothes really fast and get them into stores within weeks to match the catwalk, and it's becoming a huge trend. And then people are beginning to buy more clothes. So it says like we consume now 400% more clothes than we used to. So there's just a huge demand on clothing, so we need to produce more clothing. So these brands are kind of adding to it, except recently it's been exposed on how bad it is for the environment. Well, I went back after my research into my closet, and I realized that basically 95% of my closet was from stores that are having a bad impact. So then I went back and I looked up online stores which were basically helping the environment, and I looked at those and I began to think about if I'm going to buy some of those clothes and reduce how much clothes I buy. So I've reduced my shopping habits, because I would go every week and buy clothes and wear them once and throw them out. So now I'm basically reducing that.
For the Midstone project, we were allowed to do whatever we want, so I created the best soccer team possible with past and present players under the total football play style.
So how do you do that?
Well, we had to go into research. We do the design process, and I already had a decent understanding. I play soccer for the high school, but at the high school we play a simple formation called the 4-3-3. There's 11 players in the field, and for the project, my teacher said I couldn't just pick the best players. I had to explain why they would work, and I went into research on what play style creates the most success for teams, and in this case it is called total football. And the idea of it is players can replace each other because they're so technically gifted, other than the goalkeeper. And when you have the ball, spread out wide, and when you don't have the ball, condense. And simply put, when you condense, it forces the other team to play out wide and hope to cross the ball and get a header or some sort of tap in, which is less likely than shooting directly on if I weren't to condense and leave the field open. And each player, from Pele, Messi, Ronaldo, Johan Cruyff, is so technically gifted. When they have the ball, you want them spread out as much as possible. This allows for one-on-one matchups, and most of these players are so technically gifted where no one can guard them one-on-one. They need help. The idea isn't that the team is perfect, it's the play style. I don't know if you've ever watched Moneyball. Yes. And it's the idea of almost limiting your opponent from scoring and just getting one goal. And you don't need the best team. I created this team on a simulation called the game FIFA 20 on the Xbox, because I can't buy these players. I don't have the money for that. We got a $10 budget here to get this project going. But simply put in the simulation, when I played with two English teams. It's called Liverpool and Manchester City. Simply put, when I put this tactic called total football in Liverpool, they played 3 games. They won 2-1, 4-1, and then 3-0. And the idea was Liverpool has a very strong attacking 3. When they have the ball, they can take anyone on one-on-one. And when they don't have the ball, they condense. And that Liverpool has a very good back line, one of the best defenders in the world. And they were able to condense the field and block off easy taking shots. And when you see less of the goal, it's less likely to score. It's a pretty simple concept. And then when you have the ball, attack 3 is top 3 in the world. Each player's worth over 100 million. They're able to take players on one-on-one with so much space because they spread out and score. And that's really it. I'm not the coach of the high school, so I can't change the play style. But I think it's given me a greater understanding of why the U.S. doesn't have success, and that we're kind of ignorant and we like to keep things our way, even though there's a pretty simple formula to win and no one's really willing to follow it. Within here, at least.
Yes. So my booth is based off of the Greatful Dead and music culture from their time era. And pretty much the point of building this structure and designing it was to give people a break from their everyday life and to also show people that life does go on even when things get rough. And so I was really interested in why there was such a cult following of the band and why people were so heavily attracted to it. And while doing this, I learned two things. One, that the atmosphere was very important and people were able to feel vulnerable and they could kind of let out everything that they were feeling, and that's why they really liked going to the concerts, etc. And also the connection that the band had with their fans. And while Touch of Grey, the song that I analyzed and will be playing in the box, was written, Jerry Garcia was going through a lot of problems with his drug recovery, and he was in a moment of relapse, and a lot of his fans and his family and the band were all scared that he wasn't going to live. And so through this song, the person who wrote all of the lyrics was letting people know that things would be okay and that we will survive and that there's always a silver lining. So I was hoping through building this box that I can show people that even though life is stressful sometimes and it can be really hard, you can always take a step back and enter something else that you hadn't before.
What happens in there?
Sorry. Thank you. In the box, I have a bunch of abstract paintings that I made, and they match the color scheme of the band and a lot of the research that I did. And there's also an analysis of the song in poetry form, just kind of giving my explanation of what I think it means. And there's also music playing and a bunch of tapestries hanging up.
Word on the street is you stole this whole program from another town.
I stole the program from another town. Well, certainly inspired from our friends in Concord, right? The Rivers and Revolution program was a big inspiration for us, yeah. Number one, what I saw there was I saw kids excited about learning. I saw kids that felt like their learning was relevant to their lives. They had some ownership, some voice in not only what they learned, but how they showed you what they learned, which is really, really important. How is it different here than there? So theirs is a semester-only based program where kids will take the class one semester and cycle back into the regular classes the next semester. We felt like that was really disruptive and didn't give us enough time to really teach kids how to do project-based learning, and that they needed a longer time to have deeper connections with the community of the class. So we thought that that would be stronger, and that's what we did. They also include math in theirs, and we don't include math in ours. We do math outside the program. Talk to the kids, talk to the parents, see how it changes their lives.